Well, good evening. I'm Inspector Hawkins. Welcome to the Sleep Files. Today's mystery is the curious case of the 30-hour sleeper. A chap named Max here was kind enough to send his SD card with all his sleep data to my associate, Dr. Remington, so that we could open it up in Oscar and dive into his sleeping habits, then make suggestions on how to improve his CPAP therapy. Now, I must warn you, poor old Max is barely getting 30 hours of sleep a week, and so the data we look at today may not be suitable for young eyes. It will no doubt be ghastly. But hopefully for Max, we can help change that and solve this curious case. And hopefully for you, this will help you learn Oscar better and what to look for so that you can make adjustments to your sleeping habits or settings that will give you the best night of sleep in your life. Okay, so Dr. Remington has kindly booted up Oscar for us, which is a free piece of software that allows you to deep dive into your sleep data. I've rather cheekily left a download link in the description below for those that want to get it for themselves. And I'm going to have a quick look at Max's most recent week of data and suggest some ways that he might improve his sleep by tweaking some settings. So here we go. Now, I should remind you that your therapy settings are prescribed to you by a real doctor, not an inspector's associate. So only make changes to your therapy in full consultation with him or her. And if you don't know how to get to the clinical menu on your device where you can change those therapy settings, then see the links in the description for your machine too. But for now, you can just listen along and see the kinds of things to look for when you have your sleep data in front of you on Oscar. And if you want to get the RespShop treatment done to your data, then get in the comments below and I'll have Dr. Remington reach out on how you can be showcased in the next episode of the Sleep Files. All right, well, here goes. I've covered the basics on how to set up and install Oscar in a previous video, and I've also gone over some of the broad features in a masterclass video on Oscar 2. And you've guessed it, both of those are linked in the description. And once you've opened up Oscar and uploaded your data into it, you should see something like this screen. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is get a quick snapshot overview of Max's data by clicking on Statistics. Here you get averages, percentages, and totals of various statistics listed over different periods of use, including the most recent day, week, month, 6 months, and even a year. If I take a quick look, by Jove! The top line tells me that Max uses his CPAP almost every night, so that's good for starters. You can see that he's used it 344 days in the past year and every day in the last month. Max is using his CPAP for the whole of the night, but Max, my dear boy, you are not getting enough sleep. For almost half of those nights, you slept for under 4 hours. See, look here. For 164 of those 344 nights, the usage was under 4 hours. And if I look down here, it says the average nightly use over the last 6 months was about 4.5 hours a night, which is a meager 31.5 hours per week. We have found our 30-hour sleeper. Now, for context, it's recommended that most adults get between 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, which is 49 to 63 hours a week. So Max is getting just 64% of the minimum recommended sleep, which is a sleep deficit of 17.5 hours a week, which equates to 910 hours a year, which is the equivalent of almost 38 full 24-hour days of sleep lost every year. Good heavens, no wonder this case came across my desk. I don't even know how you're standing, if I'm honest, Max. That sounds like a chronic lack of sleep to me. But even without thinking about your health, which of course I am, if Max needs to be compliant to his insurance, then he needs to use his CPAP machine for at least 4 hours a night on 70% of the nights within a monitored period. So that means you need to use your machine for over 4 hours during at least 21 days of any 30-day period. Just as I suspected. According to Max's data, he only managed 17 days in the last 30 days, so it would not make compliance. And in fact, you can tell quite easily whether you're in compliance by looking at this green line here that gives you the percentage of days that you use the machine for over 4 hours. As you can see, over the last year, Max has used his machine more than 4 hours on less than 50% of the days. So sorry, dear fellow, but you're out of compliance. But in better news, Max's AHI is very low at under 2 in the medium term, and it has been even better in the past week. Anything under 5 is considered normal, so his therapy is certainly keeping his apnea at bay, so that's smashing, but it doesn't mean that there aren't improvements that we can make to the quality of his sleep. To see what more can be done, let's hop on over to the more detailed data that we're going to get from the daily view by clicking on this tab. Now here I have the latest day in front of me, and I can immediately see some periods in the night that we should take a closer look at. Oh yes, just as I suspected, Max's AH high was very low, only 0.54 for that night, or rather for a few hours of the night that he was actually asleep. But anyhow, his low AH high means that there were only 2 flagged apnea events, and they came close together, along with a large leak event at approximately, dang Dr. Remington, my watch is stuck again. Get it fixed. Approximately 450. Okay, so the main thing to look at is your flow rate, which measures the in and out of your regular breathing. Now, the pattern is pretty regular leading up to it, with a bit of a leak too. The pressure setting is slowly going down from about 10 minutes before the event, all the way down to 7.32 just before the event occurs. And that drop in pressure is nudging down the mask leak rate 2 from 3.6 to 2.4, just before things get dicey. So let's see where this leak started. Aha! I've got it! It looks like Max may have moved or been slightly aroused here because his breathing pattern becomes erratic for a bit, and there are 2 columns of leaks, followed by a small chronic leak and a hill of flow limitation rising up just here. Now this suggests that he has moved or that his airway was beginning to close, maybe because his mask leaked, or perhaps it was the new positioning that he was lying in. Now when this happened, the machine algorithm detected that flow limitation and quickly bumped up the pressure to keep his airway open. Now this successfully increased the mask pressure, but it also meant that the mask leak became permanent at that 3.6 figure that we're getting. But it did the job of keeping him asleep, and his breathing returned to normal before the algorithm started to ease the pressure off. The problem started 10 minutes later. The pressure probably dropped too much and his airway collapsed, causing this leak. Then there was a boost in pressure, followed by more leaking, and then a central apnea event. Now this could occur when the quick boost in pressure initially leaks straight out, but then the airway clears, the leak stops, and the high pressure air rushes into the airway, blowing off too much CO2 and triggering the brain's control system to stop breathing to correct for that CO2 drop. Righto, now let's take a little closer look at this RERA that I can see here. Again, we can see the pressure dropping down slowly to 6.64 in this instance, and then that flow rate becomes unstable with a bit of flow limitation, which means that Max's airway began to close a bit. The pressure picks up a little to 6.72, and it thinks that it's dealt with it, so it drops it down to 6.7 for a bit, just as his breathing flattens again, and the flow limitation comes back, and the pressure quickly ramps up, but you get a RERA anyway. Now, if you zoom out and look at the whole day, it looks to me like this pattern happens quite often for Max, and not all of them are being flagged. The pressure regularly spikes when the green line, which represents the pressure over your minimum, hits 0 because you get flattened breathing and flow limitation. Look, see here the way that these flow limitation spikes happen when the pressure line gets to your minimum. Here, 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 and so on. Now that tells me that Max's pressure minimum is probably a bit too low, as his airway needs more pressure than that to stay open. Max, my good man, my inspection report is going to suggest that if you bump that minimum pressure up a bit, you should get more even pressure through the night and avoid those RERAs and apnea events. I also noticed that the pressure from your machine never went over 9. And you can see that across other days of data that that's pretty standard. But your pressure range is currently set to between 6 and 14. Now, if I hop on over to your statistics now, I can see that even over the last 6 months, your 95% pressure limit was 12. And in the recent week, which has the lowest AHI, it was only 9. Max, I also think you should talk to your doctor about bringing the maximum pressure down a bit too, to around about 12 to help avoid those big spikes that can cause you problems. If that improves things, it could even come down a bit further than 12. And if you nudge the minimum up to 7.5, which is the average pressure over the last week, then that can help avoid those flow limitations that I've been seeing that seem to happen when the pressure gets close to your minimum. And once you make those changes, check your data again in a month and see if those pressure levels are more consistent and your flow rate is smoother. If it is, and I think it probably will be, then you have just improved your sleep. And all you need to do is get bloody more of it. Now, as I said at the beginning, I do intend to do more of these videos to help the CPAP community read and interpret their Oscar data. I think it's important for you to be able to take charge of your own therapy. Now, if you'd like to be the one under the CPAP magnifier in our next Sleep Files episode, then let me know in the comments below. And if you need anything CPAP related, of course, you can check out RespShop.com or give us a call. So until next time, case closed. Sleep tight. Bye-bye, friends.